The last time your boss texted you on a Saturday and asked you to come in, what did you say? If you said yes and you didn't want to, that's not a scheduling problem. That's a money problem. Because somewhere else in the city, someone got the exact same text, same request, same Saturday, and they texted back, "Sorry, can't make it this weekend." And they slept fine that night. The difference wasn't that they loved their job more. The difference was $10,000 sitting in a savings account. Hey everyone, I'm Sam. Today is about what that $10,000 actually does and why the gap between having it and not having it is bigger than most people think. Chris Rock had a line that I kept coming back to. Wealth isn't about having a lot of money, it's about having a lot of options. He didn't say $1 million. He didn't say a house paid off. He said options. So the real question is, how much money does it actually take to start having those options? Most people assume it's some far-off number, a number they'll get to eventually. But 43% of Americans right now don't have $1,000 saved for an emergency. Not 10,000, 1,000. And the price of that isn't just stress. It's every decision that gets made for you, because you couldn't afford to make it yourself. So what does $10,000 actually change? The first thing that changes is what you're willing to say no to. Think about two people who both say yes to their boss on a Saturday. One says yes because they want to. The other says yes because they have no other option. Same answer. Completely different weight. When you don't have a financial cushion, every unreasonable request becomes something you have to absorb. Not because you don't have a point of view, because you can't afford to use it. A survey of over 2,000 employed Americans in 2026 found that 62% are staying in their current jobs instead of looking for something better. Not because they're satisfied, because they feel like they can't afford the risk of leaving. That's 6 out of 10 people showing up every day to a job they'd leave if they could. Doing the work, saying the right things, waiting for a situation that never arrives on its own. $10,000 doesn't buy you complete freedom, but it buys you a buffer, enough to say no once, enough to make a decision without your bank account making it for you. $10,000 is the first step through that door. It means when your boss asks you to come in on Saturday, you have a real choice, not a forced one. No is a complete sentence. It just costs money to say it. The second thing I want to talk about, you become more valuable in the job market. Picture this. You get an offer, better pay than what you're making now, remote, better in every way, and you turn it down. Not because the offer is bad, but because you do the math in your head. 2 weeks notice period, a week of onboarding, then waiting until the end of the month for your first paycheck. That's close to 6 weeks with no income coming in. Your bank account won't let you make the move, even if everything else says go. This isn't a rare situation. This is why a lot of people end up stuck at the same income level, not because they're not good enough, but because they don't have the buffer to wait. Looking at the data over the past decades, switching jobs has consistently been one of the fastest ways to increase income. The math is pretty straightforward. When you stay, your raise is decided by your current employer, who already knows what it costs to keep you. When you switch, the new employer is competing for you. That's a different conversation entirely. People who stay get incremental raises. People who switch jump to a different level. But switching requires time, and that time needs to be covered by money sitting in your account. Your savings account is part of your salary negotiation strategy, whether you've thought of it that way or not. The person who can genuinely walk away from a bad offer negotiates differently than someone who needs this particular job. Even if neither of them says a word about it, the employer can usually tell the difference. And if you're thinking right now about the last time you stayed somewhere longer than you wanted to, not because it was working, but because leaving felt too risky, you already know exactly what I mean. The third one is your money starts working instead of leaking out. Quick question. When you need cash fast, where does it come from? If the answer is a credit card, here's what's actually happening. You hit an emergency, you swipe the card, you pay 20% interest per year to survive that emergency. Money that should be building goes to interest instead. And with less to fall back on, the next emergency hits harder. The loop doesn't break itself. 29% of Americans have more credit card debt than money in their savings account. Think about what that means in practice. Every time something goes wrong, they don't just lose money. They go further into debt. Then they pay interest on that debt. Then they have even less cushion for the next thing. The problem compounds quietly, month after month, in a way that never shows up as a single dramatic moment. Just a slow, steady drain. When you have $10,000 sitting there, a $2,000 problem is just an inconvenience. No spiral, no compounding damage. Some people apply this logic to everything they buy. Used cars, paid in full, no installment plan. No interest on something that loses value the moment it leaves the lot. It sounds slow, but it means the money they earn actually stays with them. And if that $10,000 is sitting in a high-yield savings account, it's earning 4 to 5% a year while you sleep, instead of you paying 20% to someone else. The first $10,000 isn't about growing money. It's about stopping the drain. The fourth one is about time horizon. You stop chasing fires and start playing a longer game. In chess, a player with no pieces left in reserve can only play defense. Every move is a reaction. There's no attack, no plan. Just trying to survive one more turn. A bank account with no buffer runs the same game. When you're in crisis mode, every decision gets optimized for right now, not next year, not 5 years from now. You check your balance before buying groceries, not to invest, just to clear the week. You calculate whether you can make it to the next paycheck, not which fund to put money into. Having $10,000 doesn't make you a perfect financial planner, but it gets you out of survival mode. And getting out of survival mode is when the timeline in your head extends. You start thinking about investing, about moving to a better job, about building something on the side, about anything with a longer horizon than the next paycheck. Not because you suddenly got smarter, because you finally have enough space to think past Thursday. You can't play offense when you're busy putting out fires. $10,000 doesn't solve your career. It gives you enough ground to stand on while you figure out the next move. The next change is one most people don't think about when they're talking about $10,000. And it might be the most important one on this list. Fifth, and stick with me on this one, the number matters less than you think. $10,000 isn't the destination, it's proof. Here's a pattern that shows up over and over. Someone spends 3 years getting to $10,000 for the first time. Then they hit $30,000 in the next 18 months. Their income didn't double. Nothing dramatic changed on the outside. The only thing that shifted was how they thought about what they were capable of. Before hitting $10,000, there's a quiet voice a lot of people carry. Someone like me doesn't save that kind of money. After hitting $10,000, that voice goes away. It gets replaced by, I already did it, so what's next? Getting from $10,000 to $25,000, then $50,000 isn't 5 times harder. It's actually easier because you're no longer trying to convince yourself you can. You already have the evidence. Even people starting from negative, from student loans or credit card debt, hit that first milestone and rebuild faster than they built the first time. Because the system is already running. The same habits, the same account, the same proof, just a higher number. $10,000 teaches you something no finance course can, that you're the kind of person who actually follows through. The last one is the most practical. What happens when something breaks and you actually have the money to fix it? Here's a concrete example. Your furnace breaks in the middle of winter. The repair company comes out and quotes you $7,000 to replace it. If you have nothing saved, that's not just a $7,000 problem. That's the next several months of your life affected. More debt, more stress, fewer choices. If you have enough to handle it without changing anything, it's just an inconvenience. You call the repair company. You pay. You move on. You don't need exactly $10,000 to start feeling that difference. $1,000 creates a meaningful gap when you've got a week until payday, and you need to cover a copay or buy groceries. But here's what's interesting. When Americans are asked how much they'd want in an emergency fund, the median answer is exactly $10,000. Not $5,000, not $20,000, $10,000. People already know this number. It shows up in surveys and conversations, in the goal someone quietly sets and then puts off for another year. The gap isn't knowledge, it's follow-through. The goal is to make a $7,000 problem feel like a Tuesday, not a turning point. $10,000 doesn't fix everything, If you're carrying $80,000 in student loans or medical debt you haven't paid off, 10,000 is still small relative to the full picture. If you live in New York, San Francisco, or Los Angeles, $10,000 is 2 to 3 months of living expenses, not the 6 months that most financial guidelines recommend. And 10,000 is a starting point, not a finish line. Don't confuse a milestone with a destination. But in any situation, the gap between having it and not having it is real. The difference between this is a setback and this is a disaster often comes down to whether there's a buffer. And that gap shows up most clearly at exactly the moment you need it most. At the start of this video, I asked, when's the last time you said yes to something you didn't want to do? Here's the same question, slightly different. If you had $10,000 in the bank right now, would that answer change? Options aren't reserved for wealthy people. They belong to anyone who builds enough of a cushion to say no. If there's a topic you want me to cover next, drop it in the comments. If this was useful, subscribe, like, and share it with someone who needs to hear this. Money doesn't buy happiness, but it buys options, and options feel a lot like freedom.